Once upon a time, there was a peasant. He had a hard life, working all year round, little better off than a slave, and with no say in what went on. He was diseased, he was downtrodden, and he was dirty. Who on earth would want to have been a medieval peasant?
Bless your shirt.
Being a peasant in the Middle Ages must qualify as the worst job in history. But of course we're only guessing, because being peasants, they didn't leave behind much record of their existence. Except once, in the summer of 1381, the peasants left an indelible mark on the history of England. The Peasants' Revolt took everyone by surprise. It was quite astonishing. From out of nowhere, it seemed, tens of thousands of peasants arrived in Blackheath on the outskirts of London and demanded the king abolish all forms of servitude, taxation, and the aristocracy. The king, who was only 14 at the time, quite understandably said he'd need to think it over. The peasants, however, wanted liberty, equality, and brotherhood. And when did they want it? Now! 400 years before the French Revolution. Talk about pushing. The king, who'd been talking to the rebels from the safety of a barge in the middle of the river, decided to go home for his tea. The peasants obviously needed to make their point more forcibly, so they rampaged through London, killing lots of Flemish people. Not quite sure how that helped. One group broke into the Tower of London. They burst into the royal living quarters, and there, according to the tabloids of the time, they sat on the beds and poked into everything with their filthy sticks. Some of them even tried to kiss the king's mother. They then dragged the Archbishop of Canterbury and the treasurer out of the White Tower and cut off their heads, which they paraded round the town stuck on poles. Now, if it sounds to you like the lunatics have taken over the asylum, that's what a lot of people at the time thought. But they weren't lunatics. The peasants' agenda was informed, tactical, and most of all, political. They targeted lawyers and court officials. They made bonfires of legal and tax records. They were deliberately erasing their servile past. How could such a wretched group of underlings have organised such a sophisticated attack? After all, they were only a bunch of bloody peasants, weren't they? Medieval feudal society was a pyramid with the king at the top and the peasants at the bottom doing all the hard work. Nobody, not even the lords, owned any land. They simply had the use of it as long as they provided military service for the king. The peasants toiled in the fields, supporting those with more important things to do, like praying and fighting each other. Yeah, it's an excellent system, if you ask me. Stinking peasants. But since the lord of the manor was often away from his estate, fighting in the king's wars, he had to be able to rely on his peasants to organise themselves. In many ways, a medieval peasant had more say in how his life was run than most people do now. Of course, it's a way of life that's all gone, and we'll never know what it was really like to live under such a system. Except where I'm going now. The village of Laxton in Nottinghamshire is the only place in England that still works on the medieval system, the centre of which is a so-called court leet, elected every year by the village farmers. In medieval times, it had the power to formulate bylaws, collect rents, and maintain law and order. Today, the court's only job is to police the way the land is farmed. Once a year, on jury day, the jurors head out to check that no one is breaking any of the rules. The land is farmed in strips in the same way as it was 800 years ago. And each farmer's strip of land is separated not by fences, but by grassy borders of common land, known as sicks.
This little green strip of grass is the dividing furrow between the two strips. This one belongs to Mr. Godson and that one belongs to Mr. Noble.
What do you mean it's not straight? Wiggly. I imagine we're going to be a big, sort of a couple of yards of nice grass. And woe betide anyone caught ignoring these boundaries. As soon as we got there, an offence was spotted. A stray piece of turf.
What do you think's left this here, Roy? Ought to be put back.
Put back in, yeah.
So this is what you call soil on the common land.
Shoveling in. What you call shoveling in. Yeah.
But we don't put it back in. Whoever's done it should
have done it.
That is a serious
offence.
So how much do you think they'll get fined for that then, right?
Oh, about £2, I think. Yeah.
It's quite stiff, actually.
Yeah.
Then down to the serious matter of marking out the boundaries of each farmer's land, using the same high-tech methods developed in the Middle Ages, which leave plenty of room for debate.
To there, where Oller is, look. See it? There? Yeah. I reckon it wants to be there. Five.
Offences such as ploughing over boundaries are taken very seriously and will be judged at the meeting of the court, a solemn affair which takes place, as it has done for centuries, in the local pub.
Right then, gentlemen, I'll call the court to order. Oh yea, oh yea, oh yea, all manner of persons who owe suit and service to the court leet of the Queen's most excellent majesty, draw near and give your attendance. God save the Queen and the Lord of this court leet.
The presentment shows that dikes are satisfactory. There's a fine of £10 on Stuart Rose for ploughing too far into the Meadow Ends sick. Mr. Rose, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, well, that was I ploughed to an original peg, which was already in the sick. So I thought I was ploughing in the right place, and I think £10 fine is a bit harsh.
Do you accept that it was the wrong place now?
Yeah, slightly, but I was ploughing to where it had been marked out.
Any comments from anyone else?
I think the fine should stand.
In medieval times, a man could be tried for murder in this
I thought
court.
was right at the time.
Well, the proposal of the court then is to reduce the fine from £10 to £5. Everyone in favour?
Yes.
Of course, it suited the lords to leave all this petty legal stuff to the peasants to sort out for themselves. But there was a snag. The experience of dealing with the law and enforcing it sometimes meant that the peasants became minor legal experts in their own right, and when they did, they used that expertise to their own ends. Sometimes, however, they resorted to rather unconventional tactics. For example, in 1200, King John proposed a visit to the city of Nottingham. The residents of the nearby village of Gotham realised that this meant he would pass through their village, making it a king's highway, and thus making them liable to new taxes. So when the king's messengers arrived, what did they do? Well, the entire village pretended to be mad. Since madness was considered contagious, the idea of a whole village of lunatics was perfectly feasible, and the king wisely decided to make a detour. But for all their cunning, surely peasants were still nothing more than slaves. In the same way that the lord of the manor had to provide military service to the king, the peasants had to provide the lord of the manor with so many days' labour in return for the land they held from him. Historians have given this arrangement the catchy title of feudal burden. But just how much of a burden were these feudal duties? For example, the peasants who ploughed these fields 600 or 700 years ago bore one of the heaviest feudal burdens in the kingdom. That is to say, they had to work for the lord of the manor for something like 50 to 60 days in the year to provide their accommodation and pay their taxes. Nowadays, most of these fields are occupied by the BMW car plant. Now, to pay for their rent and taxes today, an assembly line worker has